Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Preimesberger, editor of eWEEK. Thank you very much for joining us today for this latest segment of eWEEK eSpeaks. It's a series of informal conversations with IT leaders from every corner of the tech business. Our interviewee today is Josh Stella. Josh is the co-founder and the CEO of Fugue, F-U-G-U-E, and that's based in the Washington, D.C. area. Josh, welcome.
Chris, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I like finding out about companies that I haven't spoken with before and I haven't met you. Tell me a little bit about your background, yourself, and then what Fugue's all about. And I want you to tell me where you got the name Fugue.
Fair enough. So yeah, what Fugue does, we secure cloud infrastructure for our customers. We do that all the way through the software development lifecycle, from checking your infrastructure as code, templates themselves, all the way through to the runtime, and we check for security and compliance. So we have a ton of great customers. We're a SaaS. You can get started with us in a few minutes, but that's what we live and breathe. And I have personally for many years. Prior to founding Fugue, I was a principal solutions architect at Amazon Web Services, focused on Department of Defense, intelligence. I got to do some fun stuff at NASA too. And my career is a software developer and software architect in the national security and high-tech spaces. I've kind of bounced back and forth. So Fugue is completely focused on cloud security and making this very approachable to anyone who's using cloud. As for the name actually refers to a form of musical composition. You probably see behind me, my home office is also my home studio, in which small phrases of music are combined into very complex compositions over time. And we just thought it was highly reflective of what we were doing at Fugue, where we can give you very clear and simple insights, but we can also do things like visualize your entire cloud infrastructure in kind of a Google Maps way and help you get the big picture.
Got it. And by cloud security, we're talking about the public clouds like Google Cloud, AWS, Azure, etc. Correct?
Yes, at present we support AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Well, it's the 10th of March when we're recording this. That'll be out in about a week or two. But the public clouds initially, yes. Fugue has the architecture to be able to incorporate other control plane APIs, but that's our focus at present.
Yeah. And so basically you sit down, tell me how it works. You sit down with a customer who's interested in your services, and do you set up kind of a test program with them to see how it's going to fit into their use case, or do you do something else?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a kind of a dilemma in the industry right now about where cloud security in particular resides and who's responsible for it. And I think the reason for this is, in the traditional data center world, the infrastructure was something that was laid down kind of slowly and in a controlled way, and then you would load applications into it, right? So you would go through a recap cycle on your servers or your switches. There would be change control boards. There would be a lot of kind of manual friction to the process of building infrastructure. In cloud, the number one attack surface, like 95+% of cloud breaches, are due to misconfiguration of the infrastructure, not operating system level stuff. That's not nearly as relevant, or network level stuff in the cloud world, but configuring your network to begin with correctly, configuring the compute instances and the databases within it, those are, and particularly things like identity, are really what matters most in cloud. So when we're sitting down with a customer, we might be sitting down with the security team, we might be sitting down with the DevOps team, we might in some cases be sitting down with the GRC team to talk about SOC 2 compliance. And the way we've tried to build Fugue, the way we have built it, is so that it's really easy for engineers to get their hands on and use. So we'll point it at an account, could be a whole AWS account everywhere in the world, or an Azure account, and we'll visualize the whole thing and everywhere you have vulnerabilities. and we'll start from there. We have a ton of other features, but that's usually where we begin. And that's like a 10, 15-minute operation.
Yeah, and this is where all the cracks in the operation happen, right? When these misconfigurations happen, that is where the problems start. The surfaces become, vulnerable to hackers. Correct?
That's exactly right. If you look at some of the big breaches that we've heard about over the years in cloud, they're almost always due to things like lateral movement in identity of resources, which is a new kind of network that's very cloud native. There was one cloud breach. I won't name names on this one, but I thought it was a very, well, I'm a white hat hacker too, so I find some of these things pretty cool. But what they did is they got to a snapshot of a database and constituted a new database cluster to steal the data from there, because they knew the production database cluster was going to be monitored. So that's a very cloud native breach, and your security tools need to understand that those kinds of configurations are really where the dangers lie, and that's what we're experts in. So
Did in that case, do you remember if they made a virtual copy of the database and hacked into it, and then somehow turn those attributes over to the live database, or what?
yeah, so that's an interesting breach, in that when you're doing backups from like RDS, in this case in AWS, from a managed database service, those backups are going to object storage. So what you really need, if you're a hacker, is not access to the database that's running necessarily. You need the ability to grab the backups out of the storage bucket. And those are often more easily found credentials. Then you can go build a new managed database and say, constitute it from this backup of the production database. And then you can set up your own credentials in that database and exfiltrate data. And that's what happened in this case.
I see. The reason I ask is I know a company called Delphix here in the Valley that started off by virtualizing Oracle databases so that it could be the live database could continue working without being touched, and then they could take the virtual one and make fixes and patches and updates and everything else, and then push a button and that one became the real one. And they've grown their business a lot since then. But that's what I was thinking of. That's what it led me to think about. Tell me about how Fugue detects true drift. What is true drift? I saw that on your demo video a few minutes ago. I was wondering what could you define that for me?
Sure thing. So to understand true drift, you have to understand true knowledge of the cloud infrastructure. So in the Fugue approach, when we examine a cloud infrastructure environment, and that on AWS and on Azure, we're talking about hundreds of different resource types. Fugue is capturing every single configuration variable of all of those items. So unlike other products that are just scanning for known vulnerabilities, Fugue is looking at every single thing the cloud provider allows one to know about that cloud resource. And therefore you have a complete in-memory model. You know the complete state of that world of cloud. And when you have that, you can then say when things change, not just that they changed, which is what you would get from like log watchers, but what they changed from and to. And that context is incredibly important. Also when. So the time sequencing is incredibly important. So for example, if an EC2 instance, a compute instance, a virtual machine, has a change in its role mappings for talking to S3 or databases, that's a thing you might want to really pay attention to. It might not breach a particular security policy you have, but if suddenly one of the pieces of your compute infrastructure is getting new access to stuff that isn't really what it needs access to, the only way you're going to understand that threat is if you know how it looked before and how it looks now and what the delta is. So that's what we mean by true drift detection.
Okay,
it's the
good.
Context.
Yeah, that's really cool. I hadn't heard that before, so thanks for defining that for me.
Sure.
Would you consider? You're obviously familiar with the term observability. Is Fugue, could that be considered an observability tool within a system? It sounds like probably would, but what's your take on that?
Yes, observability and knowledge has to be the starting place of any real security program. Hacking is about 90% discovery, right? I mean, when one of my favorite things to do is white hat hack recreations of things that really happened in the world, just so I really understand them. And over and again, when I look at all the API calls I've used, usually more than 90% as a hacker are discovery, are learning the environment. And what that means for the good guys is you have to have complete knowledge of what you have. Very few folks do. They focus on a few known bad things. The hackers are clever. So yes, it is about observability from the perspective of the legitimate user and hiding everything from the hackers and making sure they can't do discovery effectively.
All right. We've got just a couple minutes left, Josh. This has been great. Who are some of your customers that you can talk about here so that our readers kind of can connect the dots here?
Sure. So our early days at Fugue were very much focused on kind of federal security, national security kind of space. We're very much focused on commercial now, but one of the folks who've been with us for a long time are SAP's NS2 division. That's their national security subsidiary. And they're running a lot of the biggest cloud deployments in the world and have been using Fugue for years now to help secure those. Red Ventures is one we're really proud of. These are the folks that own CNET now, and they switched to Fugue. They brought in almost 500 cloud accounts into Fugue in about a week and a half through our automation. Who else? Wabtec, which is a GE spinoff. MC. I mean, we've got a lot of great customers really in the kind of global 2000 and regulated industries, and also in fast growing high tech companies that have large cloud footprints.
Very good. So you said company is about 7 years old. You're privately held. You have some VC backing, and it looks like you're in a really good lane going forward because you cover a lot of ground here with this service. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Josh Stella, the co-founder and CEO of Fugue. If people were to look for Fugue, would it be fugue.com or is it some other domain?
It's actually fugue.co.co. FUGUE.co.
Okay, well then that's where you go, folks, if you're interested. Thank you very much, Josh, for coming on, and hope to have you again later. I think you're going to be, you have your finger on the pulse of a bunch of trends here in security and cloud. So you're a good resource. Thank you.
Well, call me anytime.
Okay. And for everybody following along to the end here, thank you very much and have a great rest of your eWeek. Thanks for joining us on eWeek eSpeaks. Go to eWEEK.com to hear more conversations with IT thought leaders.